Chapter 341 Greed. While the onlookers around him were still enthralled by his moves, Hiro, upon hearing the notification of the system, slightly curled his lips. As much as it was fun to execute those moves, it was quite tiring as well. Given his physicality, he had no problem. But executing those complex sets of moves sure exhausted his mental energy. After all, he had to concentrate deeply to execute those moves. Strangely enough, despite dribbling being his forte, Hiro found Mateo's dribbling style rather unique. And only after trying to mimic it multiple times had he figured out the uniqueness of this simple but effective dribbling style. But still, he was quite elated about the outcome. Not only had his knowledge about dribbling broadened, but now he could even copy a talent possessed by such an amazing player. Those hours he had put into analyzing his game, those efforts he had put into figuring out his play style, every effort he had put into this quest felt like it was worth it at this moment. While he was feeling grateful about the effort he had put into it, the system directed him to his rewards. Oddly enough, there weren't that many talents he could choose from the set of talents Mateo possessed given his expectations. Contrary to his expectations, unlike Park Sung-gyu, Mateo had a limited reserve of talent. However, every single one of them was of huge help to Mateo. Equilibrium, S. Phantom Steps, S. Heart of Steel, S. Dribbling King, SS. These four talents in particular piqued his interest. A talent that could increase your balance while dribbling, a talent similar to that of Skill Lightning Steps, but only activates in cases of throw balls, a talent to fortify your mentality, and a talent of the highest caliber I've seen until now. Every single one of those talents was impressive, and every single one of those talents complemented each other greatly. Truly, those combination of talents could make anyone a skilled dribbler. Also, Hiro being a dribbler himself, every single one of those talents could be of great help to him. Upon seeing those impressive assets, Hiro was overcome with desire to the point of salivating over them. Selecting one among those fine sets of talents was torture. How could he only select one when there were so many good pieces of stuff in front of him? No matter what he chooses, a lingering taste of regret would be left in his mouth. But even so, no matter how much he wished to possess all four of those special talents, he'd have to suppress his desires and make his own choices. However, he still couldn't afford to decide in a hurry. He'd have to carefully consider and select one talent that would be of great help to him in the upcoming tournament. So for now, he decided to delay his picking and focus on the training instead. After all, the training had yet to come to an end, and it was only wise to be careful when picking. Exhaling a mouth full of turbid air, Hiro then hurried over to his teammates. No sooner had he joined his teammates, he was met with his teammates' captivated stares and questions filled with curiosity and bewilderment. How did you execute such flawless moves? Will you teach me those moves? Bombarded by questions, he spent his time answering their questions. Enough rest. Now everybody gather up, we'll do some drills. The coach's voice rang out as he commanded everybody to gather up for some training drills. Upon hearing his loud voice, players dragged their lethargic bodies towards him. Although they were still exhausted, they had no choice but to obey his commands. It must have been really hard to maintain your center of balance while executing those moves, right? While making their way toward the coach, Yutaka intoned, pointing out the most important thing required to execute those skillful moves. As soon as he heard his comments, Hiro turned his gaze to Yutaka, surprised by what he had said. Exactly as mentioned by him, it was extremely important to maintain one's center of balance while executing those moves. More than those fancy footwork and movement, bodily gestures and balance played a huge role in acquiring those skills. Even Hiro, who had spent days learning about it, had only figured it out recently. But Yutaka immediately pointed out his day's worth of finding in one single glance. At this moment, Hiro was both amazed and terrified by his observation. But even so, he couldn't bring himself to act utterly surprised. Thus, no sooner had he displayed an expression full of shock on his face than he immediately recomposed his composure. He truly is a genius. Pity, that his mentality is holding him back from achieving his true potential. Hiro thought while frowning his brows, pitying Yutaka. As the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow on the field, the training intensified. Hiro and his teammates engaged in a series of challenging drills, each one designed to improve their agility, speed, and teamwork. Zigzagging between cones, expertly weaving through obstacles like dancers in pursuit of perfection, every single one of them engaged in the drills designed by the coaches with utmost diligence and obedience. Although a lot of players complained about the intensity of the training, still they carried out their tasks with diligence. And as morning light grew stronger, so did the intensity of their training. In conditioned drills and relentless scrimmages, Hiro and his teammates tested their mettle against each other. Finally, after a long, arduous training session when the morning sun had fully risen and the field was bathed in its light, the training session came to an end, tattered and exhausted beyond their limits. No sooner had the coach announced the end of morning training than almost everybody collapsed on the floor. Their sweat-drenched body lay atop the grassy field as they tried to find solace in the refreshing coldness of the surface beneath their tired-ass body. Chapter 342 Talent Decided. Smiling, Manager Haruki mused at their progress. Although their performance needs improvement, at least nobody gave up halfway, while sweeping his gaze across the fallen bodies of the players lying on the field. As soon as his eyes landed on Hiro, he couldn't help but watch him curiously. I knew he was different, he thought. But how different is he? Doesn't he ever get tired? Lying on his back, Hiro pondered. It's only logical to choose the talent with the highest grade. Even though he knew that he was being reasonable. But despite that, he couldn't bring himself to execute his thoughts right away. An unsettling feeling was preventing him from taking action. As magnificent as those talents appeared, each had its own set of flaws as well. And just because one talent was ranked higher than others, he couldn't make his decision easily without taking its compatibility with him into consideration. After all, he had an important tournament upcoming, and he didn't want to screw this tournament because of one wrong decision. Thus, because of such reasons, he was having quite a hard time selecting the talent. After some time, as some of them recovered barely enough to move their exhausted body, they started heading out. Despite their agitation towards the brutality they had suffered, almost none of them had even an ounce of energy left to complain at this moment. All they could think at this moment was to get to their dorm as fast as possible and lie on their comfy bed to relieve some pain. "Are you coming? You don't seem tired at all," Yutaka asked Hiro as he stood to leave like his other teammates. "You guys go on. I'll catch up later." Acting as if he was intrigued by the beauty of the azure sky above him, Hiro refused. "Leave him be. He'll come once he gets hungry." Saying so, Shun turned to leave. After some while, as everybody left the training ground, he found himself all alone. The warm rays of the morning sun, which was falling onto his body, were extremely soothing, while the occasional gust of breeze was quite refreshing. If only he didn't have to think about the talent to choose, he'd have preferred to just take a nap while lying there. Closing his eyes while letting himself lose in the beauty of the moment as he stood still, he started contemplating the talent to choose. Weighing the pros and cons of each option, he finally decided after much thought, "I'll go with Equilibrium." As usual, the moment he locked onto the talent he wanted to possess, he felt subtle changes taking place in his body. Oddly enough, it was quite soothing. It was as if a burden had been lifted from his body, and his body had gotten lighter and more stable. New talent acquired. Equilibrium S. Improves your stability to a great extent. Provides a permanent boost to your dribbling. Lessens the chances of falls and twisted ankles. For an S-rank talent, there wasn't much description, but it was still enough to understand the sheer importance of this talent. The talent that had allowed Mateo to flourish was right now in his possession. If not for this talent, Mateo's highest-rated talent wouldn't have amounted to anything at all either. Though dribbling King Talent's grade was the highest to execute the perks of that talent, a stable body was required. And without the aid of Equilibrium, it would be just like a car without any brakes. But just having a good balance wouldn't have amounted to anything either. Without skills, almost anything will amount to nothing. And Hiro would have picked the talent dribbling king if he wasn't a good dribbler. But since he was already a good dribbler himself, he chose the talent equilibrium to assist his dribbling prowess in many other aspects such as shooting, heading, etc. After all, not only would this talent reduce his chances of injury and assist his dribbling, but it would also allow him to shoot more effectively since it would allow him to correct his shooting posture. With such thoughts in mind, after careful consideration, he made his choice. And the smile on his face at the moment was a testament to his decision. November 10th, 2023. Gelora Bung Tomo Stadium. The stadium pulsated with anticipation, its expanse filled to the brim with passionate fans. Lights danced across the pitch, illuminating a stage for a grand spectacle. Right now, in this very stadium, a grand spectacle was about to take place commemorating the start of the U-17 World Cup. As the fiery hum of excitement filled the air, the stadium lights dimmed slowly and a hushed silence fell upon the crowd. A lone spotlight illuminated the center of the pitch, where a silhouette of a person appeared seemingly out of thin air. With a bang of colored smoke, a person emerged from within the smoke, and at once, the stadium came to life as colored lights of different colors ran amok in the stadium. A wave of emotion swept through the stadium as the fans rose to their feet. At the same time, music echoed in the entire stadium as that person who right now was the center of attention started singing. Apparently, he was a local celebrity with a huge fan following. And since today's match was going to be held between the host nation Indonesia and Ecuador, home fans had flocked into the stadium in huge numbers. The spotlight then shifted to a group of young children, each representing different nations participating in this global event. In the background, the music was still playing while those kids trotted onto the pitch, carrying the flags of their respective nations. The show continued for a while as one after other famous personalities demonstrated their charms and entertained the crowd thoroughly. Finally, as the show concluded, the moment arrived when the teams themselves emerged from the tunnel. Immediately, no sooner had both of these teams made their appearance, a crescendo of cheers that shook the entire stadium to its core echoed. "Hurry up, Hiro! It's going to start." Looking at his phone, Shun urged Hiro to hurry up in a rather irritated tone. Chapter 343, 12th Player. Currently, while the opening match was about to commence, every player from Team Japan had come together to enjoy the opening match and also to analyze their opponents. Despite the cheerful sounds echoing from the speakers, the room was heavy with a grim atmosphere, evident from their expressions. And the reason behind their darkened expression was the group allocation. Grouped with teams like Argentina, Senegal, and Poland in Group D, also called the Group of Death, how could they relax and enjoy? Argentina, the recent senior world champion with an extremely skilled squad, Senegal, a powerhouse team from Africa whose senior team had won the recent AFCON, and Poland whose youths are wreaking havoc in the European leagues. Every single one of those teams is extremely formidable. In fact, considering their situation, right now, they should be preparing for their matches instead of concerning themselves with a completely irrelevant match. Yet to ease up their morale, manager Haruki had allowed them to watch the opening match. But by the looks of it, it seemed like it wasn't much effective. "Has it started?" Hiro asked as he entered the room, accompanied by Shun, who appeared rather unhappy and irritated at the moment. Well, considering how much he had waited for Hiro, his bitter mood was quite justifiable. Yet 7 minutes have passed, while everybody remained silent. Yutaka answered in a rather dispirited tone. Yutaka's response, however, only got on Shun's nerves as his already bitter mood turned even more bitter after hearing his response. Darting his cold gaze towards Hiro, he gritted his teeth, expressing his unhappiness. But Hiro, who was standing right next to him, completely ignored him as he trod forward towards Yutaka without even glancing a single look at Shun. Right now, the person at fault seemed oblivious while the victim was upset. And Shun, who was aware of Hiro's personality, knew that he wouldn't get anything from becoming irritated at him. He'd only do himself harm. Thus, he let go of his anger and joined the group. They're playing better than expected, aren't they? Surprised by the play the Indonesian player had shown so far, Shun mumbled. Many of them before the start of the match had assumed that the Indonesian team would play defensively because they were the underdogs. But not only were they not playing defensively, they had generated a fair amount of chances, and they were challenging the opposing team. Currently, 20 minutes had already passed, and Indonesian players were holding their ground without any sort of difficulty. In fact, most of the time until now, they were the ones on the offense. You shouldn't underestimate the home team. After all, currently, they're playing with 12 players on the field, Hiro answered. Shun was perplexed by Hiro's answer and asked in a confused tone, 12 players? Does he mean that they've bought the referee? Many of his teammates who were listening to his remarks couldn't help but attribute the remark about the 12th player to the referee. But until now, he hasn't made any controversial decision. Or did I miss something? Such doubts surfaced in the hearts of many of his teammates who were listening to his conversation with Shun. While most of them weren't at fault for thinking such, after all, in modern football, scandals regarding referees are quite common. And a term about the referee being the 12th player is quite popular as well. Before anyone could let their imagination run wild, Hiro's answer left them feeling ashamed. He explained that supporters are often referred to as the 12th player on the field, and having such an advantage, Indonesia is performing even better today. It's a shame that in today's world, football seems to be more about sensationalism and drama than the beautiful game itself. Instead of celebrating the players and their talents, many people seem to thrive on scandals and defamatory stories. And even these young players who have yet to explore the beauty of this sport are defiled by the negative agendas floating on the internet. If some players perform exceptionally well, there'll always be those envious of him defaming him, attributing his success to shady means. Truly, it's such a shame that those who know nothing about balling are acting as if they know everything about the sport, spreading false news and defiling the beauty of the game. Just as they were conversing, suddenly the intensity of the match intensified as the Indonesian players ferociously charged forward after a failed attempt from the opposing team. As the Indonesian players moved the ball upfield, players from Ecuador quickly fell back. Failing to stop their momentum would surely lead to a disaster. The crowd became extremely excited as a hushed silence fell upon the stadium while watching the play taking place on the field. Getting close to the defensive third of the opposing team, the Indonesian winger lobbed the ball toward the box where their team striker was making his run. There was almost close to no defender of the opposing team present inside the box. If not for the sole defender of the opposing team, it would be like getting a free shot. Still, the Indonesian striker was outnumbered since the opposing team had 2 players inside the box while he had no teammates for support. At this moment, he was required to produce results by himself. After all, right now he was the center of attention of thousands of eyes filled with expectation. And if he missed this golden opportunity, he'd for sure disappoint those expectant eyes. Not only that, he'd also incur the wrath of those expectant eyes. The weight of pressure on him was quite heavy. Yet even that pressure couldn't bring him to his knees as he slotted the ball inside the post with a beautiful header. At once, as the ball sailed inside the post, a crescendo of cheers erupted from the stadium as the supporters of the home team were overcome with joy. In the 22nd minute of the match, the home team took the lead with a stunning header from their team striker. Chapter 344, A Time Together with the Team. The home team's joy, however, was short-lived as within the next 6 minutes after scoring their first goal of the match, the away side responded with a magnificent goal and silenced the raging fans burning with passion. Instantly, a hushed silence fell upon the entire stadium while the away side celebrated their goal, completely disregarding the feelings of the home fans. While the fans of the home team continued to express their grief, the players of Japan began to present their side of the judgment for conceding this goal. They shouldn't have left him open. How could they fail to stop one player with 3 defenders? At this moment, while most of the players were complaining about the mistakes of the Indonesian players, acting as if they were omniscient, Shun's words left them utterly speechless. Then why don't you all try ganging up on Hiro? Saying so, he swept his gaze across them, but every single one of them avoided his gaze. Sure enough, they were all bark and no bite. Why is he mentioning my name? Hiro thought as he heard Shun's remarks, clearly unhappy with having his name mentioned. So much for acting as if they're better, Shun snorted, sneering at their omniscient attitude. Right after conceding that equalizing goal, the players of the home team regained their composure as they pushed for a second goal that could give them the lead. Supported by countless home fans, none of them dared to slack off as they all gave their very best to meet the expectations set by their fans. For the rest of the time, they capitalized on almost every opportunity that came knocking on their door and attacked ferociously, not giving the opposing team a single moment to rest. But even so, the opposing side persisted and resisted their flurry of attack. Contrary to everybody's expectations, the Indonesian side was dominating the Ecuadorian side. More so, after that second goal, their whole team had become united and their performance had soared to the next level. Still, though, even after countless tries, the home team failed to score another goal. The same was true for the away team. They couldn't score any goals either. And just like this, a thrilling first half came to an end. No sooner had the whistle to announce the end of the first half had rung than a collective gasp echoed in the room housing the players of Japan. Damn, it was such a thrilling first half, right? Especially after that goal from Obando, it was like the game had entered the next level. The scene in the room was completely different than what it was before the start of the game. Filled with the opinions of players, the once grim and tense ambience in the room was starting to liven up. Seated at a certain distance away from the players, manager Haruki revealed a satiated smirk as he felt extremely relieved by the change taking place in front of him. From the moment the players found out about the group allocation, the morale of the squad had been quite low, which had been concerning. But now, finally, when the morale of the squad was showing signs of recovery, he couldn't help but feel relieved. For the past few months, the matter regarding the players' low morale had truly been worrying him, and thinking about the solution to improve this situation had been draining him out mentally. If not for the Indonesian players performing so well, they might still be sulking. But now that they have witnessed that even the team they thought of as an underdog could demonstrate such a brilliant performance, it will surely boost their confidence. Feeling grateful towards the Indonesian team, manager Haruki credited the change in the mood of his team's locker room to the Indonesian players. Subconsciously at this moment, he had even started to pray for the home team's victory. After a short break, as players from both teams began to walk out of the aisle, once again everybody's attention was drawn towards the screen. Guys, it's about to start. Until a while ago, it was still noisy, but now that the second half was about to commence, a hushed silence fell upon the room as everybody shifted their attention towards the screen. Beep! As the whistle of the referee resounded, the clock started ticking again, and the life returned in the stadium alongside the movement of the players and cheers of the fans. Both the teams seemed equally ferocious as neither of the sides was willing to back down. Surely, something must have happened in the locker room. Just by looking at the performance of the players on the field, one could figure out that something must have taken place in that short break. Under the crescendo of cheers, both sides attacked each other and tried to take the lead. But even so, none of the sides managed to score that goal that could give them the lead. Even until the 80th minute, the scoreboard remained the same with no changes. Indonesia U17-1 versus Ecuador U17-1. With only 10 minutes remaining on the clock for the end of the second half, both the team became extremely desperate for that second goal, which would grant them precious 3 points and a head start in the tournament. But at a moment like this, players are likely to make mistakes. And that's what happened as well. One of the Ecuadorian players made a slight error as he let the opposing player steal the ball from him. Witnessing this moment on the screen, many of Hiro's teammates became extremely excited as most of them subconsciously clutched their hands. The closer the Indonesian player got to the post, the more their eyes grew anxious. As if his scoring that goal would mean something to them, they placed their hopes on him. But alas, he blew it away. Both their hopes and his team's victory at the same time. Beep! The match came to an end as the opposing keeper saved the last-minute attempt of the Indonesian player. At once, A disappointed sigh echoed in the room as players expressed their dissatisfaction. Oh! Chapter 345 Japan U17 versus Poland U17. November 11th, 2023. Jalak Harapat Stadium. Far in the west horizon, as the sun drew closer to its slumber, the sky transformed into an ever-shifting portrait. What had been a brilliant blue canvas just an hour earlier was now awash in vivid streaks of fiery oranges, deep reds, and blazing pinks. Wispy clouds floating above the west horizon seemed to be set alight from within, glowing like hot embers against the deepening background of indigo and violet hues that crept in from the east. Down on the pitch, the lush green grass seemed to shine an almost electric emerald under the bright stadium lights that had just flickered to life. The freshly painted lines and crisp markings stood out in stark whiteness, ready to form the boundaries of an impending battle. In the stands, the crowd was a rolling murmur of excitement and anticipation while more and more fans were flocking into the stadium. Few people dressed in guard uniforms were showing the seats to those who had come to seek help. And while some had already made themselves comfortable, some were still trying to find their seats. Though compared to the capacity the stadium could house, the stadium appeared mostly empty, with only a specific portion of the stand being filled with people. As impressive as the lively sound coming from the stadium appeared, the attendance was rather lacking. Well, this much was to be expected. After all, it wasn't the match of the home team. Inside the dimly lit tunnel, the atmosphere was rather complicated to explain. A crescendo of cheers kept on bombarding from the mouth of the tunnel, yet players dressed in blue appeared rather tensed while the players dressed in white seemed unbothered and carefree. It's almost as if an invisible wall was separating these two sides from one another. Compared to the looks on the eyes of the Polish side, which were brimming with confidence, the defeated looks on the eyes of the Japanese side were like a gloomy day. But even so, not every eye appeared lifeless. There was also the presence of eyes which was raring to step foot in the field in front and emerge victorious. One such eye was of the person leading this gloomy side. His broad shoulders seemed capable of shouldering any responsibilities placed on them while he stood proudly in front, wearing the captain's armband and number 10 behind his back. Jolting his gaze toward the opposing team, he secretively peeked at one of the opposing players with tousled blonde hair, Patrick Mazur, currently playing for Juventus. If it weren't for the help of the system, I'd never have even dreamed of meeting you, let alone playing against you. But now that we've met, I can't wait to see how my skills fare up to the talent from one of the best clubs in the world. Right now, while most of his teammates were anxious about facing players who've been showcasing their skills in one of the best leagues in the world, Hiro was raring to find out the skill difference between him and the world. With eyes full of excitement, he continued to steal a peek of that blonde-haired boy who was unaware of Hiro's gaze until a moment ago. Suddenly, however, he turned his eyes towards the direction of Hiro. Why is he looking at me like that? Patrick thought as he noticed that sly smile on Hiro's face. Unknowingly right now, out of excitement, Hiro had been smiling while looking in the direction of Patrick Mazur. He was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't even notice the gaze of Patrick, which was directed towards him. But as he came back to his senses, he finally noticed that Patrick was looking at him weirdly, as if he was some kind of psycho or a crazy stalker. Now, simply turning his head away would only make him more suspicious. Thus, instead, to combat this awkward situation, he forced a sweet smile on his face as he greeted Patrick. This action of his, however, only made matters worse, as Patrick contorted his face in disgust upon seeing that amiable smile on his face. Immediately, he then abruptly jolted his gaze away from him. I guess he's not fond of socializing, faced with Patrick's unresponsiveness. Hiro thought as he tried to justify Patrick's action, completely unaware of the fact that he had creeped him out. After much waiting, they finally started to move as they headed out of the tunnel after listening to the announcements of the commentator. However, the moment he walked out of the aisle, the system's holographic panel floated in front of his eyes. New quest available. Quest objectives. 1. Score a goal. 2. Provide an assist. 3. Achieve an 8.5 rating. Rewards. Copy one talent of any one player of the opposing team. Failure. Random 2 skills you possess will be suppressed in the next game. Such a quest, which required satisfying multiple objectives, had never occurred to him before, and that too on random. Thus, for a brief moment as it caught him by surprise, it caused him to halt his movement midway while marching towards the field. Yutaka, who was walking right beside him, given his absent-mindedness because of the pressure from the match, bumped into him. Losing his balance after bumping into Hiro, he let out a soft cry. Hiro, however, didn't budge even an inch. Well, if Yutaka had meant to push him, he'd have lost his footing in the least. But right now, since Yutaka himself was walking absent-mindedly like a zombie, even if he was not prepared, it could hardly cause him any damage. Why are you stopping so suddenly? The players from behind complained, as many of them bumped into each other because of Hiro's actions. Well, just like Yutaka, many players were anxious right now, and thus had lost their focus, which caused this incident to take place in the field. But still, the core person responsible for this incident was Hiro. Most of the people in the crowd, upon witnessing this comedic scene taking place on the field, burst into laughter, while some became extremely anxious. Just from this incident alone, they could vividly spot the nervousness in the players they supported. Traveling to such a faraway land, just to show support to their team, how could they rest at ease upon seeing such miserable condition of the players they were going to support? Chapter 346, Japan, U17 versus Poland, U17-2. Turning to look at their miserable state, opposing players as they moved forward sniggered at them, making fun of their clumsiness. Will they be able to run later in the game? If they're already like this? One of the Polish players remarked in a rather mocking tone, making fun of Japanese players. I hope that their fans won't reprimand us for bullying them later in the match. Another player added, sounding extremely full of himself. From a moment they had met the Japanese side in the tunnel, they had been aware of the air of anxiousness lingering around the Japanese side. And that crappy mood in the opposing side had only acted as a fuel to boost their confidence. This is why, right now, every single one of the Polish players was acting so full of themselves, completely looking down on the Japanese players. To them, only one player was worth their attention. The captain of the team, Takahashi Hiro. Having studied their games before, even they could tell that their captain was of a different breed. And if left alone, he could tear apart their whole team single-handedly. Thus, right from the beginning, they were extremely careful while selecting the opponent they wanted to intimidate. And Hiro, for sure, did not fall on the list of players they wanted to provoke to deal further damage to the morale of the opposing team. Sorry for pausing so suddenly. Feeling the sensation of someone bumping into him, Hiro apologized as he turned behind only to notice the sight of a frightened Yutaka. Sorry, sorry, I wasn't paying attention. As if he couldn't hear anything, he kept on apologizing while blaming himself despite it not being his fault. From the looks of it, Yutaka appeared extremely frightened. It was almost as if he had committed a heinous crime and was begging for forgiveness after being caught. Even though Hiro was aware of the anxiousness lingering in their dressing room, he hadn't expected his teammates to be this anxious. Especially Yutaka. He right now was a lost cause. Starting him in the match was almost akin to playing with a walking bomb in the team. For a moment, while looking at Yutaka's sorry state, Hiro couldn't help but ponder about the decision of the coach to let him start. But then again, most of the other players' conditions would be the same as well. Playing with them for such a long time, he had come to know about the mentality of most of his teammates, glorifying the European players as some sort of geniuses, devaluing their worth. They feared those who had already started playing professionally for a team in either Europe or South America. Well, it isn't their fault too. After all, these kids had grown up watching the brilliance of the players in Europe and hearing the stories about how good the academies are in Europe. And since most of them haven't experienced playing against those so-called talented players whom they've been hearing so much about since their early days, it's only natural for them to feel nervous and also scared. If not for the systems helping boosting his gameplay, Hiro's state wouldn't have been that different from his teammates. Now, what was he going to do after noticing such low self-esteem of his teammates? Would he ignore them or would he help them overcome their fear? It was all up to Hiro to decide. Sure, he could just focus on his game and try to complete the objectives set by the system by himself. But in doing so, he'd be abandoning his teammates and would be playing with a handicap which would make the game even more difficult. And there's only so much one could achieve by themselves in football. After all, football is a team sport, and every head has its value in the match. As much as he was aware of the problem his team was facing at the moment, he was also aware of the solution that could, if not completely solve the problem, but could solve the problem to some extent. Words may work temporarily, but it wasn't a permanent solution. Thus, he'd only be tiring his mouth by trying to encourage these lost causes of teammates using his words. What his team needed right now was a boost of confidence. And what better way would there be to achieve such a result than by exceeding the hopeless expectations of his teammates, who had already admitted defeat even before the start? Thus, for now, Hiro chose to ignore the matter regarding the low self-esteem of his teammates and continued to tread forward while thinking about ways to complete the quest provided by the system. Getting an opportunity to copy the talent of one of the future superstars. How could he back out from the challenge? Well, even if he wanted to back out, he didn't have any choice since the quest was mandatory. But more than the temptation of the reward, he was worried about the punishment. Why, you may ask? It's because their next match was against Argentina. And to beat them, he couldn't afford to lose any of his skills. Both the teams then lined up next to each other as they awaited the speaker placed in the stadium to play the national anthem of their respective nation. Even though the stadium appeared mostly vacant, more than 4,000 fans showed up for this match. Shortly after, as the coin toss ended, players of both teams traded a friendly handshake and walked towards their position to start the match. The small number of fans present in the stands was as loud as ever, passionately cheering for their team while fluttering the flags of their respective nation. Finally, the game then began with Team Japan's kickoff. Beep! No sooner had the referee sounded his whistle than the lifeless field came alive with the movement of the players. Passing the ball back to his teammate, Nijichi started the kickoff. Chapter 347 Japan U17 versus Poland U17-3. Brimming with confidence, the opposing players started pressing high right from the get-go. Running wildly after the ball like an enraged wild boar, they did what anyone with a brain would do. They tried to take advantage of the obvious weakness Japanese players were displaying right from the get-go. They tried to take advantage of the sloppiness and low self-esteem of Japanese players by intimidating them with their relentless charge. And as expected of the Japanese players, upon experiencing the intense pursuit of the Polish players, they lost their composure. No sooner had the game started than their formation started showing signs of collapse as several holes emerged in their formation. Mispasses, mispositioning, and miscommunication had become a common sight on the field right from the start. And the Japanese fans, disappointed and frustrated by the miserable gameplay that their sides were displaying on the field, most of them were on the verge of losing their sanity. It hadn't even been that long, yet most of them were already tongue-tied. It was the worst starting they had seen to date from their players. Given their mistakes and clumsiness on the field, it didn't take long for the opposing side to take control of the game. And the first breakthrough moment came quite earlier than expected as well. Stealing the ball from Nijichi, who was trying to move upfield, Patrick Mazer, who was playing as a defensive midfielder for the Polish side, charged forward with the ball. To stop him, Hiro rushed towards him since he was the one closest to him. Defending wasn't his forte, yet still, he had to stop this man at all costs right now, or else he wouldn't get an opportunity to salvage the self-esteem of his teammates. This challenge, as much as it was a crisis, was also an opportunity. But everything depended on the outcome, whether it would turn into an opportunity or a crisis. Sure, his defending techniques weren't as good as the defenders of his team, but still he had learned enough basics of the art of defending to cover his flaws. Keeping his eyes on the ball and the movement of the player while also keeping track of his eye movements, Hiro approached the incoming Patrick, who was rushing toward him without any fear. Having studied the gameplay of Patrick, Hiro was aware that as much as Patrick was good at retaining position, he was also a beast at ball handling. And even with his tiny frame, he was quite sturdy on top of that. So, Trying to outmaneuver him using his physique was out of the question as well. At this moment, as Patrick approached closer to Hiro, both their eyes met for a brief moment, each flashing with confidence, unwilling to back down. Making it appear as if he was swaying his body to the left, Patrick tried to deceive Hiro with a body feint. But Hiro didn't move as he was expecting. Instead, he calmly moved his body towards him while also keeping track of the position of the players behind him. Rushing forward recklessly would only result in his defeat. Being aware of the consequences of recklessness, he didn't react to the provocation of Patrick. Instead, he maintained his pressure on Patrick by keeping the distance between them close, but not close enough for Patrick to make a sudden dash. Faced with Hiro's composure, Patrick's eyes became a little restless. He knew that Hiro wasn't good at defending, and he was confident enough to take Hiro by himself. But what he didn't expect was that he could cover the flaws in his techniques with his cool-headedness and positioning. Once again, he tried to use his body feint, but this time, he didn't try to fake his movement. Moving along with the ball, he tried to get past Hiro using a combination of body feint and step over at the same time. Now, Hiro could no longer keep on maintaining his distance from Patrick. He had to intercept, or else Patrick would simply pass the ball to one of his teammates. Although he had kept him occupied, giving enough time for his teammates to position themselves. But in doing so, he had allowed Patrick time to think, and also allowed Patrick to move in their half. Now, finding an opportunity after waiting for so long, Hiro swept his leg towards the ball and made his move. However, what seemed to be an opportunity was rather a bait. A bait set up by Patrick to lure Hiro into making his move. And Hiro, who thought that he had done fairly well by keeping Patrick occupied, fell for this trap. Patrick then simply did a 1-2 and got past the reach of Hiro. Seeing Patrick's figure sprinting past him with the ball, Hiro's eyes became extremely frantic as he tried to change his direction as fast as he could and pursue Patrick again. And he successfully managed to do so as well. But Patrick, however, didn't continue pushing forward with the ball. Instead, he made a through pass to his teammate who was trying to cut inside the attacking third from the center. While most of his teammates were still unaware of the intention of Patrick's pass, Akutsu reacted quickly as he noticed the number 10 of the opposing team making his run from the flanks. A good pass from Patrick Mazur, praised the commentator, sounding rather serious and captivated. Alongside Patrick Mazur, there was another beast on this Polish side. Their number 10, Jakub Adkonis. With exceptional off-the-ball movement and an innate ability to smell goal, he would have perfectly played the role of a number 9. Yet, even with such ridiculous goal-scoring capability, he played as a midfielder. And this man, who was nearly about 185 centimeters tall, was right now rushing towards the ball with eyes that seemed to be hungry for the goal. The crowd, upon witnessing this intense clash so early in the match, couldn't stop themselves from staring at the field with anticipation and excitement flashing in their eyes. Both Jakub and Akutsu reached the ball almost at the same time. But the one to have the last laugh was the opposing midfielder, Jakub. With a single touch of the ball, he evaded the reach of Akutsu. However, he didn't manage to completely leave him behind, as no sooner had he got the ball behind Akutsu than Akutsu started chasing after him. Sensing the pursuit of Akutsu, he could tell that if he continued to hog onto the ball, he'd lose the ball eventually. Thus, after getting close enough, he fired the ball from outside the box. After all, most of his goals had come from the spot outside the box. Chapter 348, Japan U17 versus Poland U17-4. Sensing the threat, Shun slightly widened his steps as he tightened his muscles and prepared himself to launch. Jakub, while preparing to shoot, his leg muscles compressed like a coiled spring, building up the tension, gathering the firepower required to send the ball sailing toward the post. The next moment, as he struck the ball, the built-up tension on his leg got released on the ball, which in turn sent the ball flying towards the post. Bam! Cutting through the air, the ball sailed toward the post at an unbelievable speed, mesmerizing the eyes of many onlookers while at the same time sending chills to the supporters of the receiving side. Unfazed by the incoming ball, Shun launched himself toward the ball. With his body stretched to its utmost limit, he bravely threw his body with only one thing on his mind. I'm going to save this ball no matter what. As Shun went flying towards the ball, a silent hush fell on the stadium. Thud! A mixture of a collective sigh and excited roar tinged with a hint of relief echoed as Shun made a brilliant save, keeping the flow of the momentum from drifting away. Disappointing the opposing fans as Shun stood on his feet, he let out a loud, passionate roar while beating his chest. Yeah. Many of his teammates who were close to him rushed toward him and joined him as they all tried to rile him up even more. That was a heck of a brilliant save from the Japanese keeper, and you can see it in the eyes of the Japanese players, how much this save means to them. But I guess someone needs to remind them that they still have to prepare themselves for the corner, commented the commentator. Exactly as mentioned by the referee, the threat hadn't been warded off, it had only been delayed for a while. And right now, while the players of Japan were shouting at the field, expressing their excitement, players of the opposing team were rushing towards the penalty box, probably to catch the Japanese players unguarded by taking a quick corner. Everybody position yourself. It's not the time to celebrate, Akutsu yelled, sounding furious. Only then did Shun and the others snap back to reality, realizing the threat that was headed their way. Immediately, they then began to scatter as they started to prepare themselves to face the corner kick that Patrick was going to deliver. Compared to most Polish players, their side was like a group of middle school kids going up against high schoolers. And due to the height difference between most of the players, this situation was rather threatening for them. As expected of the Polish players, before all of the Japanese players could even make it to the box, they took a quick corner. With numerical and height advantage, the situation looked rather bleak for Team Japan. But call it their cockiness or their confidence, whatever it be, instead of going for a cross, Patrick tried to score directly from the corner. Maybe he had seen an opportunity because of the lack of coordination of the Japanese players, or maybe he thought he could score a goal directly from the corner because of Shun's mispositioning. The ball, as it sailed towards the post, Shun rushed towards the opposite pole where the ball was headed. Based on the trajectory of the ball, he could tell it was going for the top right corner. Is he nuts? Such thoughts ran amok in the minds of many in the stadium as they glued their eyes on the ball with utmost anticipation and nervousness. Still, most of them couldn't hide the excitement contained within their hearts as well. After all, a goal directly from the corner rarely happens in football. Throwing himself in the direction of the ball with his arms stretched, Shun made a desperate attempt to land a touch on the ball. However, even with his speed and flexibility, he still failed to land a touch on the ball as the ball simply glided past his hand. At this moment, his pupils constricted with fear while he felt his heart sinking in midair. He couldn't even follow the ball all the way. Oh! A collective cry, full of disappointment, echoed in the stadium as many people smacked their heads upon witnessing the ball missing the post barely by an inch and flying out of the field. No sooner than he fell, Shun immediately turned his head towards the post to check on the goal. Thankfully, he didn't notice the ball inside the post, which relieved him as he buried his face on the ground while exhaling a mouth full of turbid air. Phew! Until a moment ago, his heart was racing. But now as he confirmed that he hadn't conceded a goal yet, his heartbeat started stabilizing. Shun couldn't be more grateful, while at the same time, Patrick couldn't be more frustrated. Kicking the grass while bitterly clicking his tongue, he stormed towards his position. His teammates, although seemed quite irritated, remained silent as they all stormed towards their respective positions as well. It seemed that they had a lot to say in their mind, but they simply couldn't bring themselves to voice their opinions. The game then resumed with a goal kick. But their nightmares didn't come to an end. Instead, they got even more scary as the opposing players didn't give them any opportunity to catch their breath. Bombarding them with shots one after the other, the opposing team relentlessly pushed forward for a goal. If not for Shun making saves one after the other by throwing his body on the field as if his body was made up of steel, they would have already conceded more than 4 goals even before halftime. It's not that Hiro hadn't tried enough, but the opposing players had thoroughly studied him and left him no space to operate. More like they blocked all his pass courses. They made it so that the ball wouldn't reach him in the first place. Though he did shake his mark quite often, none of his teammates could manage to connect the ball to him, which made it extremely hard for him to demonstrate his skills. Beep. Just like this, the first half came to an end with none of the sides managing to find the back of the net. Still, one could hardly argue that the MVP of the first half was definitely Shun. One intense first half it was. Not only the Polish side are dominating the position, but they are giving no space for the star player of Japan to operate. If the coach of Japan doesn't come up with any strategy to counter, it's only a matter of time before their impregnable wall falls. Chapter 349, Japan U17 versus Poland U17v. Seated in their seats with a seemingly dull and lifeless look in their eyes, none of the players appeared to be in the mood for bickering about each other's mistakes. Hiro, himself, who was currently helping Shun with his muscle soreness by applying patches to help him relieve his pain, was in no mood to point out the flaws of his teammates. After all, he wasn't in a better position himself to say anything to his teammates. Well, it wasn't particularly his fault, but still, he had no achievement under his name until this point of the match to support his voice. Hence, with none of the players speaking a word, the air around the room was rather heavy. Just then, manager Haruki and his coaching staff entered the room. The moment they entered the room and experienced the dull atmosphere in the locker room, most of the coaching staff couldn't help themselves from frowning. Narrowing his eyes on the players who appeared to be in much more desperate condition than the rest, Haruki, as he swept his gaze across the locker room, sighed internally after finding out about the number of players who appeared demoralized. Unable to see such a miserable sight, he then tried to roll his eyes away. But then again, he couldn't bring himself to do so. He knew that they were giving their best, and he had already expected such scenes, but still visualizing and experiencing the actual moment felt completely different. But more than anything else, these players here needed his help at the moment. He couldn't deny that it felt extremely horrendous to experience this moment. Yet still, he couldn't afford to go soft on his players, despite their situation. Being the manager of these players, no matter what, he was required to take responsibility for his players. He had to do something to uplift the morale of his locker room. Talking about strategy, however, was out of the picture for the moment. After all, what use would the strategy be if his players couldn't even execute his strategies well? But just as he was about to step forward to speak, assistant coach Kazan beat him to articulating his words first. "Good job, guys." As he heard those words of praise coming out from the foul-mouthed Kazan, manager Haruki couldn't hide his surprise as he jolted his gaze towards Kazan and looked at him with his eyes open wide. However, the next words from Kazan relieved him. "By playing such magnificently, I'm sure you all will take us out of the group stage with ease." No, not only group stage, but you'll take us out of the whole tournament." Kazan's words were extremely harsh. It was like a sharp dagger shot toward their heart. However, the tone of his voice and the way he spoke those words totally contradicted the meaning he was trying to deliver. Not even a tinge of anger could be found in his voice. Instead of sounding like harsh criticisms, it sounded more like words of praise. Hearing those words, many of them felt like their heart was bleeding. And those sarcastic words of Kazan weren't least bit helpful to ease their already tense mood. In fact, it made them feel even more worthless. Compared to the scene at the locker room of Team Japan, the scene at the locker room of Team Poland was rather chaotic and noisy. How could you not even score a single goal by now? Their whole formation was a mess, and yet you can't score a single goal? And now don't give me some lame, pathetic excuse about their keeper preventing you from a goal. Sounding extremely furious, the manager of the Polish side yelled as he furiously stomped his feet on the floor, radiating a threatening aura of someone who was going berserk. Just like docile lambs in the presence of a shepherd, players of the Poland U17 team listened to the rumbling of their coach with their eyes looking at their feet. Most of them were so scared at the moment that they were literally trembling. At the same time, some of them didn't appear to care at all. Even so, the manager of the Polish side wasn't willing to cut some slack on his players. Moreover, the more they remained silent, the more he exploded at them. pointing out almost every single player who wasn't playing well according to him. He complained as he demanded improvement. And the players who were powerless in front of their coach stayed put as they listened to the nagging of their coach. With the score tied, it's anybody's game. But if Japanese players continue to play like how they played in the first half, it's quite likely for the Polish team to come out as the victor. While the commentator was expressing his opinions, players of both teams walked out of the tunnel for the second half of the match. Strangely enough, both sides seemed rather sharp. Even the nervous players of the Japanese team, contrary to their appearance in the first half, appeared quite riled up. The moment players walked out of the aisle, the audience welcomed them back on the pitch with a thunderous sound of applause. The Polish players, just like in the beginning, appeared rather loud, almost as if they were intentionally trying to appear noisy to get into the heads of the Japanese players. Hiro and his teammates, however, unlike before, completely ignored them this time, as they all trod towards the field without paying any heed to the mocking remarks made by the opposing side. Well, not that they understood them in the first place. Even in the beginning, the sole reason why they were affected in the first place by the mocking remarks of the opposing players was because of their fears. But now, after going through the talk that took place in the locker room during that 10-minute break, they couldn't afford to be affected by those baseless taunts of the opposing players. Chapter 350, Japan U17 versus Poland U17-6. Just like the rest of his teammates, Hiro too made his appearance on the pitch, walking alongside Shun. But seemingly appearing lost in his thoughts, he appeared not to care about the noise going on around him, nor did he appear to care about the glares of the opposing players he was getting without any reason. Maybe there was a meaning behind those glares, as if they were trying to tell him that even in this half, they'll keep him under their pocket like how they had done successfully in the first half. Or maybe they were trying to figure out what he was up to. Who knows what their intentions were? Right now, all he could think about was how to complete his quest. Registering a goal and an assist is still doable, but what would he do about the third objective? After all, the match rating would be decided based on his overall performance of the entire match. And after that shitty display in the first half, achieving an 8.5 rating was rather a difficult task even for him. Though Hiro didn't heed their hostile glares, Shun was replying hostility with hostility and glares with glares. Glaring right back at them while making a face like that of a delinquent. He was provoking them without any care. What's he looking at? You shitheads? It's like after denying them any goals in the first half, he had gained indomitable confidence. Feeling like a Goliath, he felt as if he could do anything at the moment, let alone going up against those bunch of Polish players' glares. Heck, he could even take them on a fist fight all by himself. So, was the adrenaline rush he was feeling at the moment. Though none of the opposing players could understand what he was talking about, they could still tell that he was swearing at them by the simple body cues and the tone of his voice. Yet, oddly enough, none of them wished to engage with Shun at the moment. Well, after listening to the complaints of their coach in the locker room, only a fool would try to create a fuss. Nothing good would come by engaging in a battle of provocation with Shun. With such thoughts in mind, they then retracted their gaze from them and parted ways, heading to their side of the pitch with their mouths shut. Revealing a satisfied grin on his face, Shun scoffed as he continued to glare at them even after they parted ways. Yeah, who are you trying to intimidate, shitheads? And only after they walked quite far away from him did he retract his gaze from them. At this point, he and Hiro had already walked quite far into their side of the field as well, and he had to rush back to his position for the referee to start the game. All of a sudden, Shun then stopped as he asked something that had been on his mind for quite a long time. Why are you falling back so often today? Faced with Shun's questions, Hiro became speechless. He couldn't tell that he was doing so because he couldn't trust his teammates to supply him with the pass. It would only make him seem untrustworthy. Thus, for a while, he continued to search for excuses. But no matter how hard he tried to think of a reasonable excuse, he couldn't come up with any. Noticing Hiro's silence, Shun decided not to pester him more on that matter because of the urgency of the situation. And he knew Hiro well enough already. If he was remaining silent, then there must have been something on his mind which he couldn't explain. Instead, as the time was running out, he tried to encourage him. Leave the back line to me. You just do what you were good at. Saying so in a rather confident tone, he stretched his fist towards Hiro. Though it wasn't the reason why he was falling back often, oddly enough, he still felt assured upon hearing his claims. Truly, Shun was on a roll today. Smiling, he then bumped his fist against his as he mumbled, "Sure, let's do that." Beep. The second half commenced with the sound of the referee's whistle. By now, the sky had already transformed into a breathtaking canvas of black and indigo filled with countless stars. Alongside the shimmering stars, the crescent moon cast an eerie glow across the sky. However, its light faded in comparison to the lights of the floodlights installed in the stadium. And rarely did anybody in the stadium take notice of it due to the ongoing match on the field. For quite a while, the opposing team pushed aggressively, especially Patrick and Jakub. Those two seemed even more ferocious than before. But, despite their efforts, the score remained the same as Shun continued with his form from the first half. Making countless unbelievable saves, he held his side of the bargain. Compared to the first half, Hiro's situation too got somewhat better. But still, he found it quite troublesome to find the back of the opposing net. Just then in the 74th minute of the match, after making a brilliant save, Shun immediately played the ball to Takashi, who in turn sent the ball flying towards Yutaka without wasting any time. Even now, instead of going after Yutaka or Nagichi, the opposing team rushed towards him. Sure enough, it was already visible to the audience by now that Hiro was their priority target. Rushing towards the left flank, away from Yutaka, who was charging from the center, Hiro made use of his skill, lightning steps. There was already a defender stationed at the left flank, and one of their center back was also cutting in from the center while Patrick was chasing him from behind. Sure enough, they were trying to isolate him and outnumber him. Did he make a wrong pass? The commentator questioned as all of a sudden, just before he clashed with the player closing in towards him, Yutaka kicked the ball towards the right flank, where seemingly nobody was present aside from the left back of the opposing team, who was sprinting backward after failing to score a goal a moment ago by going on the offense. Because the spotlight was focused on Yutaka, he failed to take notice of Hiro, who had swiftly changed his direction midway. If not, the commentator wouldn't have made that blunder.